Welcome to the Selectmen meeting. Pursuant to Governor Baker's March 12th, 2020 order suspending certain provisions of the open meeting law, Chapter 30A, Section 18 in the Governor's March 15th, 2020 order concerning imposition on strict limitations on the number of people that may gather in one place. Meetings in the town of Upton are being conducted via remote participation to the greatest extent possible. No in-person attendance of members of the public will be permitted, but every effort will be made to ensure that the public can adequately access the proceedings as provided for in the order. So with that, we'll call the October 6th Board of Selectmen meeting to order. Today we've got a pretty busy agenda. We've got some minutes to approve. We're going to go over the EDC charge. Well, now that we've got that charge and the number of volunteers set up, we'll do the appointments to that committee and fill that out. We have to approve the election warrant, the special town meeting warrant we'll discuss. We'll talk about the town meeting quorum and then some grant exceptions that we'll be doing, going over the priority list, which is really just an administrative check-in for the board and for Derek. And then we have the DPW feasibility committee at the end of the meeting to talk about what they've been doing. So with that, why don't we go ahead and get started? I see Dave Ross is here. Do you want to present and talk about the updated EDC charge?
Sure. Thanks for having us back. I see there's a couple members here from the EDC also, Steve Racketon and Michelle Antonelli. We had a meeting yesterday, so I don't think the official update was attached to the agenda or the proposed update that we voted on. I know Sandy tried to send it to you guys last night, but we took a look at the 4 items we had in the proposed charge from the last meeting, and thanks, Derek. So we had the original 4 items here that are being shared on the screen, and there was some feedback around the order, around the inclusion of references to other plans that should be in there, reference to a town planner that we don't actually have. So we took that feedback and we made a handful of edits. So Derek, I don't know if you have the proposed edits document or that we voted on yesterday. Kelly sent it around to us at 4:20. But in essence, what we did was we took what was originally the second item listed and we made that number 1. And that was based on feedback from Selectman Matillion. And we said the EDC shall to work to encourage economic development in all of the town's business and commercial districts.
So sorry, just hang on one sec. It'll be a lot easier if we can look at this while you're doing it, because I think if our goal is to approve it, then I think we're going to want to see the words. Do we have that?
Yeah, I'm just trying to go through my emails. Kelly had sent this yesterday.
You know what? I have it if you want me to bring it up.
Yeah, that'd be probably easier. Go ahead.
Because I did see that you guys made most of the changes that were brought up at the last meeting. So I just want particularly Steve to be able to see that, and Maureen as well. But I know Steve, you had some very specific feedback too. So I want to make sure that that's visible to everybody.
Yeah. So here we go. Thanks, Kelly.
And just let me just chime in real quick. And I did receive that email earlier today. It shows the 4, and again in that different order than we saw last time, but it does show that 4 proposed EDC, let's just say paragraphs that describe the charge. So I do see that in my email. It's just, I think it's helpful if we have it up on screen so people can all see it.
Yeah, it's up on the screen now. Can you see it? Or can everybody see it?
Mm-hmm. Yes, I can.
Great. And I found the plus button on the right-hand side. Let me zoom in for my eyes here. I could see it a little bit better, in case that's helpful to people. Sorry, Dave, go ahead. We're here.
All right, so we had 4 bullets before. It's still primarily the same main concepts. But now the first bullet says the EDC will work on economic development for the whole town. And the other change we made here was consistent with the latest economic plan. So we had some discussion last meeting about making reference to the master plan. And so the EDC had a lot of discussion yesterday around one thing that was discussed 2 weeks ago, and that the master plan is almost 15 years old. Whereas the economic plan, we are very close to finalizing. You'll find it on one of your agendas probably before the end of the calendar year to vote to accept that. And as the economic development plan, we thought it would be most important to stick to the economic plan instead of the master plan, which also talks about open space and recreation and housing units, which are really not under the purview of the EDC. So that change was made there. Number 2 was what number 1 was. We just moved that down. Number 3 was where we had working with the town planner. We removed that language. We feel there's no reason that the EDC itself cannot be working on a doing business in and with Upton process guide, be kind of our local liaison with business leaders and bringing that information back to this board and others. And then the last one remains unchanged except for the adding economic plan at the end there. So some minor tweaks. I think the main feedback we had heard was focusing on the whole town, number 1, not making reference to a position that we don't actually have, which was the town planner. So we removed that. And then trying to tie into a broader plan or something to guide us. And we felt economic plan was the way to go versus the master plan. So this in front of you was what was voted on as our proposal from the EDC yesterday.
Yeah, I mean, I from my perspective, this looks great. I'm pleased with the changes. I think you guys did a great job. I went over the economic plan draft today, just to review that and see how it related to and reflected some of the spirit of what's in the master plan, because in the master plan there is an economic development section. So clearly that would be the point of reference for the economic development committee, as opposed to housing units and things that weren't relevant. Regardless, this updated economic plan, when it's finalized, is essentially, the economic becomes the content that would show up in an updated master plan. So I think that's a prudent and change to be made. So that's great. So that's it. From my perspective, I'm good to go with this. Steve, why don't you let us know your position, and then Maureen, you as well.
Yes, I like the changes. I think switching 1 and 2 was definitely a good idea. And again, as David had mentioned, not making reference to a position that isn't currently filled. So I think it all makes sense to me. I think in this situation, less is more. So I think this is a little more streamlined than what we had 2 weeks ago. So yes, I like the changes, and I am in favor of it as presented.
I'm also in favor of it as presented. I think you've done a great job, Dave, you and the EDC committee, and I applaud you for that. And I think that this is a good start.
Awesome. I will take a motion.
I move that we accept the EDC charge as presented.
Second the motion, Stephen Metellian, aye.
Maureen Dwinell, aye.
Brett Simus, aye. Unanimous action. Thank you. Next, we have the EDC volunteer applications. We have 3 open slots on the committee, and we have 4 volunteer applications. So as is always the case when we've got more applicants than we have slots, this often is sort of a challenging time for us as a select board, because we know that everybody's very enthusiastic about helping. We want to make sure that we've got as many people engaged in this and involved as we can. but we'll go through the process. I've reviewed all 4 applications. I'm familiar with the work that each of the 4 applicants has done for the town on various boards and committees. Steve, Maureen, I'm guessing that you've also reviewed the applications, but I guess I would open it up and see if you have any questions for any of the applicants, or any more information you want, or any discussion. Otherwise, I'll entertain nominations.
I've read all the applications and I'm ready to nominate.
Yes, I as well have read all of the applications. I think, obviously, I know, Brett, you and I have had the same position in the past. It's always a shame to turn anybody away. So when you have 3 open seats and 4 people, obviously someone will be left unhappy when this meeting's over. So I guess I'll start with just a couple of general questions and kind of get a feel for, it's been a while since I've talked to a few of the candidates. So maybe just take a minute. And with regard to EDC, I guess most specifically is, what do you see? What's your idea of how the EDC can perhaps entice a business or entice the businesses that are in town to either thrive or expand? And what do you see perhaps that is an opportunity that Upton may have to attract new businesses? So I guess I don't know exactly who's on. I can see David Brooks and I can see Kathleen Warsham. So if you two would like to take that in order and just give us, as a board, a brief overview of what your thoughts are. And then anybody else that's online, please chime in when either Mr. Brooks or Ms. Warsham is finished.
Well, since you named me first, I'll go first, and that was throwing a quick question at me that probably needs some thought. There are 2 things that have occurred to me over the time, and one I've talked about a lot. I think we've seen in the planning done by Selectmen the examples of other towns, but I don't think we've seen a good visualization of how our downtown would look. I think a visual presentation would go far to helping to entice people to how the downtown would look. Well, no, the ways it would look, it obviously wouldn't be definitive to attract people to the center. The other point I've made is that Upton is growing at the right-hand end of its demographic. There's us in Rockwood Meadows, there's the people up in Upton Ridge, there may be the Governor's Landing development, all people of a certain age with a certain amount of time and money on their hands. And it will be good to emphasize that cohort as possible customers for the downtown and start appealing to them, start marketing to them as well. So there's a demand side for this as well. That's a point I've made often. So those are my immediate quick answers to you. Of course, everything is complicated by COVID. And I like the EDC, I don't have an easy answer for how to deal with the current situation with development freezing, except development's freezing in the city. We may be able to take some overflow out here in the growing ex-urban area. Little random thoughts, not very well coherent, but I can probably write them down later if you want.
Okay, thank you. Kathleen? Or Catherine, I'm sorry, Catherine, my bad.
That's all right. Can you hear me all right?
We can now. Pretty delayed.
So I think that one of the things that we would be foolish.
That might be better. Give it a go.
Okay.
I can't hear her. Can you?
Yeah.
Can you hear me at all?
Yes, we can hear you now.
Okay. Derek's nodding. So if you need me to write it down later, I'll do that. But I think one of the things that we would be foolish to pass up is any further synergies with the library that we're and community center that we're planning to build to drive foot traffic in that area, with a variety of things that you could drive to the center, because most people don't live within walking distance of the center, and then do multiple different things, get a coffee, you know, just a bunch of different small businesses that you could stop in while getting library books with your kids and going to the playground and getting a slice of pizza on the way home from whatever at the VSW. Just those sorts of businesses would be the kind of thing that I would hope to encourage, something that isn't just you drive to that and then that's all you do when you go home, but something that would drive foot traffic more, would be what I would think would be best. And I know I can see Craig on, and I think he's one of the other applicants.
Okay,
Yes.
very good.
Why don't you go ahead?
Thank you.
Thanks, Catherine. I'd like to further the visioning project that we have started with the RFP committee and kind of bring it to fruition. I agree with all the points that are made within the visioning process, within the visioning statement, having a vibrant downtown, seeing new local serving businesses in town, coffee shops, maybe grocery stores, a hardware store, maybe restaurants, things that will be useful for the citizens in Upton and things that people will appreciate, while also kind of working with the EDC to help these businesses thrive financially. I know we're a smaller community, so it might be a little bit challenging, but I look forward to collaborating with the EDC and just kind of putting together some ideas on how we can help these businesses thrive in our smaller community. And I'd also like to see affordable places to live. I know that was kind of discussed within the visioning statement. Affordable housing, maybe on the second floor, possibly. And I'd also like to see our tax base get expanded to help offset the financial burden to our citizens. And I know by bringing in new businesses, we can help to further achieve that goal. So that's pretty much it. Thank you.
So this is Michelle Antonelli. I'm the fourth applicant. And I feel that I have an unfair advantage because I know what the EDC has already sort of proposed in these areas. So I'm deliberately not going to mention them and just mention two things that I think are specifically important. One is that the Economic Development Committee has to work very closely with the other departments here in town, because we can't really look at economic expansion without infrastructure expansion. And, you know, even though we're in a pandemic, and I'm very uncomfortable even saying this, but I do know that interest rates are very low right now. And as we look at economic expansion, we really need to look at the infrastructure, the water, the sewer, and this might be the time that we need to make the moves on those types of things so that we have the basis for both more affordable housing and multi-use buildings. So I think it's really important that the Economic Development Committee not strictly focus on like how to attract a business, but really look at the whole town and what makes a business prosper or be able to do business here in town. The second thing, the second question was how to help businesses that are already in place. The Economic Development Committee started to work in that direction, and then we were consumed by our role in getting the downtown project sort of up and running. But I think it's extremely important that the Economic Development Committee reach out to businesses and explain things like the grants that are available for providing ADA access, the tax cuts that are available for ADA access, and, you know, really targeting how to do business in Upton, helping people find out what signage is important and what signage has to, what guidelines signage has to meet. You know, simple things like that. I think that's sort of a charge that we have neglected a little bit, and we really need to target to make it comfortable for businesses to remain here in Upton. We've lost some businesses and they haven't been replaced. And I think it's equally important as we build the infrastructure to attract new business and make it a good place for people to do business in Upton, that we also look after the businesses that are already here.
Great, thanks. Any other questions, Maureen or Steve, before we nominate?
None for me, thank you.
No, I have no other questions, thanks.
Okay, great. I will take the first nomination.
I would like to take the first nomination and nominate David Brooks, Craig Winefuss, and Catherine Rorsham.
I would make my nominations for Michelle Antinarelli, Catherine Worsham, and Craig Winefuss.
And I would make mine for Catherine Worsham, David Brooks, and Craig Winefuss. So it sounds like we agree on Winefuss and Worsham, is that right? And Maureen and I agree on David Brooks.
I would like to second Brett's motion. Maureen Dwinell, aye.
Do you want to motion each appointment separately, or how do you want to proceed, Brett?
Is there? I mean, I'm fine with going with the motion to. Go ahead, Derek. You want to say something? Yeah.
If you just wanted a recommendation, it probably would be easier just to vote each individual singularly versus as a slate, and just go through each one of the candidates.
All right, perfect. So why don't we go through them one at a time?
I would make a motion then to appoint David Brooks. Maureen Dwinell, aye.
Brett Simons, aye.
I would make a
Stephen
motion.
Metellian.
Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead, Steve.
Okay. I was going to say Stephen Metellian would be a nay.
Okay.
I would make a motion to appoint Craig Winefuss. Maureen Dwinell, aye.
Brett Simons, aye.
Stephen Metellian, aye.
I would make a motion to appoint Catherine Worsham. Maureen Dwinell, aye.
Brett Simons, aye.
And Stephen Metellian, aye.
Unanimous action. Okay, thank you. We will review and approve the election warrant. Kelly, I think this is your presentation.
Yes. Do I need to bring it up on the screen, or are you guys good with it?
I'm fine. I looked at it. I don't know about Steve and Maureen.
This is just a standard election that, because we're having an election, a warrant needs to be posted 7 days in advance. So it shows the candidates for office as well as the 2 questions that are on the ballot in Upton.
I'm good with that.
Do you want to go to each
Yes, I had reviewed this earlier off of the agenda. It looks good to me.
Same here. I'll take a motion.
I would move that we approve the election warrant as presented. Maureen Dwinell, aye.
Stephen Metellian, aye.
Brett Simons, aye. Unanimous action.
Excuse me, Brett, if I could just ask for each of the selectmen to come in the next week to actually sign the physical document so I can get it posted. I'd appreciate that. Thank you.
Excellent. Will do. Now we will review the 2020 November special town meeting warrant.
First, I'd like to thank the selectmen for their confidence in me, and I will do my best to contribute. And Dave, I'll see you later.
Thank you all. Yes, and congratulations. We certainly appreciate the time, effort, and energy that you've all put in on various boards and committees for the town, and all of your time and energy going forward. We're very fortunate to have so many great and qualified volunteers to help out with such an important endeavor for the town. So thank you very much.
Yeah, I would like to echo those thoughts. Thank you all for stepping forward. It's too bad that somebody was not able to participate, especially since they were a member for the last 2 years, but I guess that's just the way it goes.
I would echo the thanks also.
Thank you. Article 1 was updated. When we looked at the warrant last, Steve, it was vague, and what's here is vague, but I think that the EDC has gone back and in their meeting is proposing or revising this to address your concerns, Stephen, to make it more specific. But I think Dave Ross, do you want to cover this one or the changes to this one?
Sure. So I agree that we had a very vague placeholder article in there before, and that's because there were a lot of pieces moving. So originally we had put that article in there saying that we could potentially look to acquire land in the Upton Center Business District, the downtown area. And there were 3 parcels that we were potentially targeting. One of those parcels, we've been unable to make contact with the landowner. That parcel is located next to the town hall parking lot on Warren Street. So obviously that's a moot point for November. There's another parcel of land that we think makes more sense to potentially look at going to CPC, because it would simply be purchasing a piece of land to reserve it as open space to provide passive recreation into Heritage Park. Early discussions with the current owners of that, they would be open to discussing a potential deal there in the future, but there's no urgency there. The third parcel, which is what we're going to amend our Article 2, is looking at, I don't believe it has an actual street number, so I'm going to have to refer to it by the owner's name, the Thompson parking lot, which is located across Grove Street from the Racine building. Currently, it's used to park a number of pieces of commercial equipment there. As you may recall, that was originally included in the RFP as one of the parcels of land that would go out, and very appreciative of the fact that the board had previously done a P&S with the Thompsons to lock in the price, and the original hope was that that would have been a transferable P&S over to the winning developer or the winning bidder on the RFP. Unfortunately, we did not have anyone, and that P&S has since expired. Since that has happened, or around that time frame, Mr. Thompson has received another offer for that parcel of land. The EDC yesterday talked, and we had a fairly lengthy discussion. I would say it probably exceeded an hour. And there are some members here that can feel free to chime in if they want to add more color to what I'm saying, or if they think I get something wrong. But we felt that it's prudent for the town to continue down the path to look to acquire that piece of land and to keep it either, at least in the short term, under the town's control, potentially long term, maybe it stays under our town control and it's municipal parking downtown, or to put that in when we look at including what was the pizza lot, the Pizza House lot, which is now a small little parking lot, and the church, because as you look at the development overall for that downtown section between the church and the arcade building, and we're assuming there would be some structure built on that additional town hall parking lot there, those 14 spaces, there's no parking to support that development unless it includes this lot. And if this lot goes into private hands, it's really going to be difficult to try to get a developer to come in and meet our own guidelines for the number of parking spaces needed for what we hope is probably a 3-story development that is half, or I shouldn't say half, we don't know what the right mix would be, but a decent amount first floor commercial, and then the second and third floors are residential. And as we all know, you need so many spaces per unit, or on the commercial side per square footage. We're losing potentially a big chunk of downtown parking with the new community center. We don't know if that's going to go forward or not, but we can't wait to find out what's going on there, because then we'll have lost our opportunity on this lot. So the EDC is recommending that we place Article 1 on the warrant, revised to be the acquisition of the Thompson parking lot. There's still work to be done before November 10th in terms of making sure that it's the right move, what the long-term strategy is, that we have a clean 21E on the site, because I know there's some environmental concerns there. Initial phase 1 testing shows that it's clean, but that's not a full 21E, and we would need to do that, which would require the town spending some money to get those answers. And if those answers are wrong, we have time to walk away before November 10th. But we've been told by the landowner, this is our last shot, and if we don't make that decision as a town on November 10th, that piece of land, which is key downtown, in my opinion, I think most of the EDC feels this way, we lose our chance at that, forever. And they're not creating more land. So an opportunity to get that under the town's control, I think is the right move for the town. So that is what the EDC is recommending for Article 1.
That's helpful, that level of clarity and detail. I think it makes this a lot more, I won't say palatable, but it's at least, it's something that's clear to the voters to vote on, so they can decide sort of up or down exactly what their preference is. Barring sort of 2 caveats, the reason that I support this is it's critical to the economic development of our downtown revitalization and realization of that vision, to be able to develop this area. And this area, including the 4 parcels that are Holy Angels, the arcade, the current municipal parking lot, and this lot that we're talking about now that has the landscaping and other vehicles and trailers parked on it. That essentially becomes one plot of land for a developer. And I'm afraid, or I'm concerned that if we don't have those parcels as a package, that our ability to garner interest from a developer will be very much hamstrung. And particularly if we want to preserve the Holy Angels church in any way, which I know was a priority coming out of the visioning and some of the design standards. So for me, this is a really important piece of that economic redevelopment. We wouldn't be able to put in the stores, we wouldn't get that tax base, we wouldn't get the affordable housing if this development doesn't go forward. And this small parcel is critical to that development, in my opinion. And I think it's certainly at a minimum worth putting this on the warrant and allowing town meeting to decide what they think. And the 2 caveats, I think, which Dave mentioned, one is obviously we need an appraisal. That's required, I think, by state law. And then the second thing is a 21E, so that we know what we're buying. And if there is some kind of remediation that needs to take place, or that we're aware of what that is and what that would cost. Because from my perspective, obviously we want to know, and as part of the article, I would think that ideally we would ask for not just the purchase price, but the inclusion of any remediation that might need to be done, assuming it's reasonable. Obviously, if it's 2 times the cost of the appraisal, then that's a no-go. But I do think that, similar to what we did with 6 Main Street, where we put an article on that said, hey, here's what it is to purchase 6 Main Street, and here's what it is to demo 6 Main Street and we did it as a package deal. So once it was through town meeting, it was done. I think that we would do the same thing with this, in that I wouldn't want to buy the parcel and then later have to say to the voters, hey, we bought this parcel, but oh, by the way, now we need to spend X amount of money to remediate it. I would want to go to town meeting in full transparency and say, this is the cost of the parcel, this is the estimated remediation based on the 21E, and this is what it would cost us to take this parcel and remediate it. So I do think it's worth putting to the voters, and with that, certainly Maureen or Steve, I'd love your perspective on this one as well.
I would echo what you have said, Brett. It's very critical to the EDC and the downtown vision, and I would fully support putting this on the special town meeting warrant with the cost of the, or estimated cost of any remediation that has to go with it.
I think there's a couple of key pieces of information that I don't know as of yet, which is the first question is, what is the actual purchase price? Derek, I don't know if you may have that answer. What is the property being offered for at this point in time? And then the other question, and I know I've looked it up before, and I want to say it's somewhere around 1/3 of an acre, but what is the actual square footage of that parcel of land?
Two great questions. So we have had an option to purchase this property, as Dave pointed out, that expired on September 3rd for $150,000. And then relative to your question on land, I believe it's 0.46 acres of land. But if you give me a few minutes, I can get you the exact number.
Okay. Although there are some good points that have been brought forward, I understand the importance of the parcel of land. I understand it is certainly a contributing piece to downtown development. At this point in time, I feel like there's more good reasons not to pursue it than there are good reasons to pursue it. I feel, we've, in the past, most recently, we've discussed the warrant just 2 weeks ago, and we sent the message really that this particular warrant was really going to be just housekeeping. 2-article warrant, let's take care of business only. I know I'm looking forward to a future topic here on tonight's agenda, but even with regard to the quorum size for the meeting. So again, we sent that message out to the people that we were just looking to take care of business as far as November's annual town or special town meeting, I should say. So I feel like that's a situation where, again, we'd be sending mixed signals. The other thing is all the data that I'm seeing that's coming out either nationally or at the state level, it appears that we're in a little bit of an economic slowdown right now, or economic decline, however you want to mention that. And each time that we're purchasing more and more property on behalf of the taxpayers and on behalf of the town, we're taking those properties off the tax roll. And it's costing each and every one of us not only the dollars that it costs to purchase that land, but it's costing us lost tax revenue, which is currently it's being used by a couple of businesses, probably open space or storage or whatever that they're using that parcel for. So again, we'd be losing tax revenue. We'd be driving taxes up in a time that it's looking like economic, again, decline or downturn of a market. Most recently, we bought 6 Main Street. And of course, 4 years ago, we bought the church, which was 3 Milford Street. So we own those other parcels, and I just don't think it's fair to keep going back to the taxpayer and asking them to buy more and more land. And again, we all know tax bills are going up and up with each passing year. So again, for those reasons, I would be not in favor of pursuing this. I would be in favor of, again, keeping the warrant simple. The 2 articles that we talked about last time, which was simply making the payment on town hall and taking care of the adjustment to the union contract. That's really what I was looking forward to doing, is keeping it simple and not looking to spend any taxpayer dollars at this point in time that we don't absolutely have to spend.
And I think, that's all, fair and valid. I think that we're all sort of feeling the sting of a lot of folks feeling like we're a real estate business, and none of us feel good about that, frankly. At the same time, I do see that this is a long-term strategic investment that, when we look out over the next 50 years, the amount of money we're asking to spend up front on getting a development like this done, even if it takes, several years to get the development done because of an economic downturn, we sort of, we've allowed that or enabled that to happen, even if it takes several years to happen, by having this package of parcels together. If we don't, and we don't have control of that parcel, then I fear that, we might be stuck with what we're looking at for the next 50 years. And I know certainly redeveloping the downtown was something that came across loud and clear when I ran for selectman. And even since then, it's something that people are obviously very enthusiastic about. In terms of putting this off until the spring, I was 100% there, Steve, right? I think we all talked about that. I think that's what we said at the last meeting. Like, let's just put the two basic things on there and just call it basic and not worry about, sort of anything else or clouding it, or just sort of let people stay home if they want to stay home without much impact. Unfortunately, on this one, or as the case may be, time is of the essence, meaning, the landowner isn't willing to wait until the spring. And so if we don't act now, this is really the chance. We've been going through these machinations, and these landowners have been very patient and very gracious. And it's been several years. And I think it's at the point now with what's going on next door, they've got an opportunity. And so they're looking to take action now. And if we don't address this now as a town and let the voters decide in this special town meeting, then we will have missed the opportunity and it will become a moot point in the spring. So that's really what I think we're trying to avoid, Steve, which is, it's not ideal, but it is what it is.
May I make a comment to the chair?
We'll finish the discussion first, please. Thank you. Go ahead, Steve. Please, thank you. Perspective.
Yeah, if I could just throw out one other idea. This is kind of also, I've got to look at this as it's a move or a strategy that we're taking that is, if you think of it from the potential business or the soon-to-be business that's operating on Grove Street now, you take away the opportunity for them to expand by buying that parcel. So everything, unfortunately, when we're dealing with relatively small parcel of land with the entire project, each move has a detrimental offset to it. And here's a situation where, again, we're trying to promote business. We've got at least the promise of a sure business in town. And now we're going to be hampering their ability to expand by buying that parcel out from under them. So, you've also got to consider that fact. Is that really what we want to do as a board? Again, you say potentially hamstring the development of downtown, but now we could in fact be hamstringing fledgling business that has decided to relocate to our town.
Yeah, a bird in the hand is worth two in the bush. It makes perfect sense, right? Like we've got a business there that's working and trying to do the right thing for the town. So I hear you. And those are things potentially that we should bring up at town meeting.
And as we've discussed with the EDC, this is a critical piece for the developer. And the developer could access, I think what the business on Grove Street is looking for is more parking, which this could become a shared parking lot with the EDC development or the developer, or with the town, if we so choose to own it.
Yeah. And I think, so I think it's worth, putting it on the warrant. Are you thinking, Steve, that you don't even want it on the warrant for voters to vote on at this time, or you want to punt it?
I'm sorry, were you asking me that, Brett?
Yes. Yes.
Oh, yeah. I think at this point in time, given COVID, given economically what we're hearing at the state level, I would not even want to move this forward in November. We can certainly revisit it. I believe we've had transferable P&S on 2 different occasions on this particular parcel. That's something I would be in favor, absolutely be in favor of doing that as I have supported in the past. But to actually move it forward and give the opportunity to spend that money and buy that at this point in time, I would not be in favor of that.
What are your thoughts on the idea that sort of this is the time to do it and that we won't have the opportunity if we don't do it now? It sounds like you're just willing to accept that risk, but I just want to, is that sort of your point?
I think that, again, just because somebody expresses interest in purchasing something, it does not mean, I can't tell you in my lifetime how many times I've either been buying something or someone's been buying something from me and the deal has fallen apart. So I don't feel like we're under any particular pressure at this point in time. I may be wrong, but again, at this point in time, I don't feel like we're under any particular pressure as far as timing. And again, if we had an idea of when we thought, let's just hypothesize that we thought we were going to take the RFP and reissue it, and I'll just project a date. Let's say February 1st, we're going to reissue an RFP. Then it would probably be prudent for us as a board to entertain the idea or pursue the idea of, again, trying to acquire a transferable P&S. But I don't think it's in the town's best interest to purchase the parcel.
Okay.
At this point.
And I feel that if we don't take the time now, that we'll lose out on it come February if that's what we're waiting for.
Yeah.
And I think the EDC, this has been the vision of the town. This is what the town wanted. They should at least be able to vote on if they want to purchase it or they don't want to purchase it.
Yeah. And I would, so a couple things, and we can move on because we don't have to vote on this now. I think we want to see the revised language for the article itself before we make any final decision on it. It's good to have this dialogue. The one thing I would offer is that certainly from my perspective, and to your point, Steve, this gets to something later on the agenda, but if we have something like this on the warrant, I would not be in favor of changing or lowering the quorum. Like if you put something like this on there, you have to maintain that quorum requirement. So just that's more of a side note than anything. So once we go through all the articles, I know the town moderator has a comment to make. So Mr. Moderator, if you don't mind waiting until we get through the articles, and then we'll get your input. Is that fair?
Great, no problem. Thank you.
Okay. So Article 2A, this was one of the administrative articles, is that right? So I don't know that we need to go through that. Same thing 2B. I think it was 2C and 3, 2C.
Actually, I think 2A was the water line, so that was actually a kind of a capital project, so to say.
The 19,000.
Yes.
Okay. Yeah. So do you have questions on that one? Or comments?
I do.
Okay. Shoot.
It's going to cost $19,000 to put water there. Isn't there a hydrant there? Is Dennis Westgate? Dennis, is there a hydrant there already?
This is Bill Taylor. I proposed this to the Community Preservation Committee from the Land Stewardship. There is a hydrant probably roughly 1,000 feet from either side of that location. So there's not a hydrant right at the location.
So I think, Maureen, I think I know where you're going with this, and I agree with you. It sounds like an awful expensive proposition to just merely put, relatively just to install a faucet for the purposes of watering. It just sounds like an awful lot of money. So I'm not sure, Dennis, if you may have some further explanation on that. It just
I don't mean to
strikes me as
chuckle.
unusual.
I don't mean to chuckle, Dennis, and I'll hand this over to you, but what I just pictured in my head, Steve, was a $19,000 spigot. So I know
That's exactly what I was thinking as well.
That's a hard one to follow. I don't know. I'll do my best, Mr. Chairman. So DPW was asked to put together a quick price on taking a fast look at what it would take to put water into that site. So there is a water line that runs along the road in front of the property. And there's a lot of questions about what will be done in the future with that property for a community garden. Will it grow? Will it expand? Will it become fields? Will you put a watering gun in there? All these questions came up. So when I considered it, and we took a look at it with my water superintendent, we considered throwing a 4-inch line into the property. First, I want to address the spigot, because that's pretty funny. You couldn't just put a spigot there anyway, because it would just freeze. You know what I mean? It's not in a house; it's outside. So yeah, it is pretty funny. You have to put what we refer to as a meter pit. So the meter pit is a structure that goes in the ground. It's deep enough below the frost line where we can insulate it. It contains the meter, so we can both regulate and we can monitor the water. As you know, our discharge permit requires us to account for every drop. Even an estimate when we have a water break, we have to tell the DEP what we estimated came out of that break. So we have to be able to meter that. So you have a 4-inch line, which is a good sized line, which if you wanted to use it as a header and break off it in the future, and you wanted to add anything else to that site, you've already done the tap, the line's already into the property. And that's a good portion of the expense. Then you have the structure that goes in the ground. It contains the meter pit. It's seasonal, so you want to be able to bleed it off. So we have to make sure that we design it in such a fashion that we can siphon it down each year and turn it off for the winter. And then we also want security. So we need an underground meter pit that has a latch on it that can be locked and secured. And we want to make sure that the whatever dispenses the water also has the ability to be monitored and secured. And only certain people would have keys, I would imagine, to access it. So the $19,000 is a fast, really heavy price to throw at it. I really feel as though we probably could beat that price down quite a bit, utilizing some of our staff to do some of the work, except for the 4-inch tap and the live tap, the 4-inch main and the live tap. But the rest of it, we probably could do a lot of it. But for conversation purposes, that was if the town didn't have anything to do with it, you just engineered it, had a company come in and do it, you're looking at $19,000. Hopefully that answered questions.
Thank you very much, Mr. Westgate. Absolutely. Appreciate that. And thanks for appreciating my humor. The other thing I think about with this is that it's coming from the CPA, right? So the CPA undesignated reserve. So again, this is one of those things that if we were strictly doing administrative, we wouldn't put it on the warrant. But if we're going to be including things that aren't administrative and we're not going to lower the quorum, something that's $19,000 out of an undesignated reserve account from CPA, and it's coming with a recommendation from that group, I don't know why from my perspective, I would support it. So.
Could I just ask Dennis to give us a price of what it would cost if we did the labor and everything? If it would bring it down a significant amount?
I haven't done that exercise yet, so I hate to be held to the fire on it, but I would imagine you could shave several $1,000s off that price.
Could we look into that then? Could you give us an
absolutely.
estimate on that, and then we could adjust the article accordingly? Thank you.
And just one other quick question, Dennis, and then I know we'll move on to the next one. Which side of Mechanic Street, as the water is coming up the road there, is it on the left side of the road or the right side if you were heading, I'll call it northeast?
opposite of the property.
Okay.
So we'd have to cross the entire road.
It's a road cut.
Yeah.
I see. Yeah. Okay. All right, very good. I have no other questions.
This is Bill. I would like to make a couple of other points. Initially, when we opened the community garden, the gardeners had to bring their own water, which of course requires that you are pretty able-bodied, so it limits the people that can participate. The fire department now has positioned their, or left their water buffalo, or one of their water buffaloes there, and they come from time to time to refill it. But you still have to carry water from the water buffalo into the garden. This would have the kind of water pressure you'd need in order to put a hose in the garden and, you know, water your beds from a hose, which would be something that would make it basically the plots available to virtually anybody. The other thing about this is I believe that this is a very long-lived faucet. It's like a one-time expense that's going to last many years. So you know, it'll have a utility for years to come, and the garden will have a very reliable source of water, and it'll make the garden more accessible to a broader range of people.
I'd like to just say to Bill, it's not that we're not supporting it. I just think that we could reduce the cost of it by using our own labor. Not to
I
say
agree. I don't
Okay.
dispute that at all. I just wanted to make some other points about its utility.
Okay, great. So we'll consider that one as written with the changes potentially to the funding amount. And then 2C is Article 3. We won't talk about because that's sort of the administrative one, right? So the other one is the 2C here with the Kelly property. So do we have any new information on that one? Derek, do you know?
The article as written is currently what we're proposing to we're having a hearing tomorrow night on both of these articles with the CPC, and nothing has changed. So it's $320,000 to acquire 4 parcels and to pay the transaction costs. I will say that parcel 1728 on your map is subject to land conservation partnership grant from Metacomet Land Trust. And if they get the grant, they will acquire that, and it will be protected permanently with a conservation restriction held by the Sudbury Valley trustees. That would reduce the overall ask to about $210,000. We expect to hear in the next couple of weeks, hopefully, about whether or not that grant's been awarded. Last year, the agency that gives the grants made the announcements in late September.
Great. And then just to confirm, it would be funded out of the Community Preservation Fund. Is that the recommendation?
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah. It's interesting to see this visual where, for folks that are on the phone and can see and aren't familiar with this visual, all of the dark green there is the Peppercorn Hill Conservation Area, and clearly these parcels are contiguous with that conservation area. And I would assume that at the time that conservation area was created, the landowners, you know, at that point weren't interested in selling, but now they've gotten to that point. You know, clearly this would make for a contiguous green space, but lots to consider here.
We estimate there are about a mile of the trails that are used by people who visit the Peppercorn Conservation Area that are on these parcels.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay.
Just a quick comment. Mr. Taylor, if I could just throw out a quick question / comment to you. When you came in, I think it was probably back in August, we talked about this parcel and we had endorsed the ask for the grant for parcel 17-28. But it was my understanding that you were going to wait until after that grant was awarded, whether or not it was awarded, and bring this warrant article forward in May. Why now? It just seems that we're pushing this a little quicker than what I was anticipating. I expected to see this in May. So after we knew for certain if 1728 was going to be funded by that partnership grant. So I just wanted to see why you escalated the timeline.
There are a couple of things. First of all, the Kellys have been very patient waiting for a definitive answer on what we can do. Secondly, if the grant is awarded, the Metacomet will have to complete the transaction by the end of fiscal year 21. And there are some costs which we can share. And so it would reduce the overall cost of the project. And finally, we will probably know, very likely know at town meeting whether or not the grant's been awarded. That's
So
November.
So if the grant is not awarded, then we are in for it for $320.
That's correct.
But this in August, these other 3 parcels were not presented to the Board of Selectmen.
Yeah, I think in August, essentially Metacomet came before you because they needed your support for the transaction.
Yeah, this is the, I recall this was the.
But they they only needed the approval for parcel 17-28. Correct?
That's correct.
Okay.
So these other parcels were not anticipated then, or they were anticipated then?
They were anticipated then. Sorry, I don't remember specifically what we spoke about at the August meeting. All 4 parcels have always been part of what we hope to acquire. Having Metacomet acquire one of them was one way to reduce the cost to the town of acquiring all 4.
I just don't remember these other 3 parcels at the August meeting. Were they presented?
I believe so. I don't know why we wouldn't have. We've talked about these as a group, as far as I know, every time we've talked about them. So.
I guess, and then one other quick question. Let's just look at both sides of 17-28. If that grant gets awarded, obviously that's good news on behalf of the town and behalf of the taxpayers. If we didn't move forward, when would the next round of grants be available where you could once again reapply for a grant to purchase 17-28 at no expense to the taxpayer?
So the Metacomet has already applied for the grant. And as I said, I think probably in the next few weeks we'll hear whether or not the grant's been awarded. Presumably, if they weren't awarded the grant, then we would be going to town meeting to ask for money for all 4 parcels. We do have an opportunity to try to do some private fundraising, and if the Metacomet doesn't get the grant, there'd be a greater need and pressure to do that. The other thing is that, and then this becomes a function of how long the Kellys want to wait. We could go back next year, the fiscal year 22, to apply. The town could go back to apply for a land grant. We didn't think we could do that this year because we were just awarded one last year, and ends up losing you some points when they go to score the grants.
So we're not really
Maureen.
sure whether we are going to get the grants.
No, we don't know yet whether or not Metacomet has been awarded the grant to acquire 1728. That's correct.
But we'll know before a town meeting. And so I think the
That's
idea,
extremely likely, yes.
yeah. So I think the idea is if we know before town meeting, then we would, and Bill, correct me if I'm wrong, this 320 would go to some different number. Is that right? Or does this 320 assume that 1728 is part of the, or receives the grant?
The 320 assumes the town is acquiring all 4 parcels. If Metacomet is awarded the grant, that 320 falls to 210, roughly.
Yeah, got it. And that's all CPA funds that would be used for that purchase price.
The 320 or the 210 would be CPA money, right?
Yeah. And have they met to talk about this? I mean, are they?
Yes, we've presented the project to the Community Preservation Committee, and tomorrow evening they're holding the public hearing, which is required, so that they can take it to town meeting.
Okay. Were there any concerns raised by that committee?
Well, everybody is concerned about money. I think there was a lot of support because the parcels are so I mean, they're really crucial to the Peppercorn Hill Conservation Area. Yeah. And in addition to that, the original acquisition was done by some people that I think were basically this is the first major acquisition and were well loved by many of the people in the community. So this is a special property in that regard.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. Any other, go ahead, Maureen.
I mean, I'll support this now, but I would like to make a request that we find out all the land that we own and who is in charge, and whether it's the conservation or the open space or the CPA, and that we are presented with a plan that shows all land under the control of Sudbury Valley trustees, conservation, open space, and that we are presented before now to purchase land. I mean, I think that we should be in the loop, seeing how we have to do the vote to accept it, to put it on town meeting. Mm-hmm. And I had no idea of these parcels except for that first one back in August. I mean, these other 3 parcels are completely new. And I think we get involved too late in the process. I'd like us to be involved at the beginning of the process, and maybe that they could give us a presentation on all the land owned and the stewardships and who's responsible and who maintains them. Mm-hmm. I mean, I don't know any of the trails. I haven't seen any of the trails. I'd like to see that. I mean, that's all part of what we're trying to do, instead of just taking this land and not doing anything with it. I don't know where the trails are, and maybe I should be more involved in that, but I would like to have a map to see what's going on. I think the board should have that knowledge also. Just a simple presentation.
I couldn't agree more. I think it's a great point. You know, I know a lot of these maps exist. I know there's trail maps. I know there's land maps that show conservation land, state land, town land, SVT land. But you're right, Maureen. Like we should look at that, or at least take a look at that. And whenever we're looking at purchasing, you know, new property out of the CPA, I'm sure they have it. I'm sure they look at it. And I think we're not the only ones that would have those kinds of questions. And you know, maybe as a general rule, and I think certainly in the case of open space, but also, Steve, this was the same point you were making with regards to the property downtown. It's like we sort of feel like at the 11th hour we're hearing about these things. And that may or may not be valid, it may or may not be fair or what have you, but if we've got that perception, then certainly people that show up to town meeting are gonna have that perception, so, and we know they do. So I think anything we can do, to your point, Maureen, and to your point, Steve, to get ahead of these kinds of things, it is only gonna help. So Bill, would you mind sort of coming back and giving us an overview of all of this, to Maureen's point, at some time?
I would be happy to come back to present to the selectmen. I would be even happier to go walking in the woods with you. Yeah, whatever I can do to make, I know there's a lot of people who work very hard on these properties. We're very proud of them, and we're very happy to share what we do with you.
Awesome.
And just a quick comment, total agreement. Brett, as you mentioned, I'd mentioned this in the past, and absolutely, Maureen, even to my points earlier this evening, which was I was under the impression we were waiting till spring to know what was going to be the result of 17-28. Because in my mind, I'm thinking, well, maybe we can acquire one other parcel via a grant. And I think we've got to be careful. I mean, my time on the board, we've acquired an awful lot of open space, and that's great. I like the outdoors. I like walking in the woods, whatever it may be, either whether it's hunting season or a mountain bike or whatever it may be. I enjoy being in the woods, but at the same time, we've got to be very careful that we're not protecting too much land to where we're really going to hurt future growth. And I think that's what we've really got to be cognizant of. And one other quick point, and I'll zip it. I think that we should really look to spend some money to make access to these parcels better, whether it be parking, more inviting, easier places to park, or the trailways to get into these parcels, especially Steffen's Farm. That's kind of been a pet peeve of mine, is we really need to have a good way in where everybody can enjoy it, even those who are not, quite as, let's just say, hardy off-road as others may be. But anyways, thank you.
Agreed on all fronts. Okay, great.
Thank you, Bill.
Yep.
Just thanking Bill for his cooperation.
Absolutely. That's great. Okay, so again, we'll take this under advisement. We know we've got at least some verbiage changes to Article 1 before we do a final review of this. Derek, just help us with the timeline. When would this warrant need to be finalized?
So we have to post the warrant 14 days in advance of town meeting. Currently, we're scheduled to execute the warrant on October 20th, our next meeting. But again, given the fact that town meeting isn't until November 10th, if we had to delay it a few additional days, we just have to hold a special board of select meeting to execute the warrant.
Okay, that should be enough time. Okay.
Are we going to do Article 3?
Article 3.
Article 3 is the article to provide the benefits to the fire union as agreed upon in the collective bargaining agreement. You'll see in that article that it's a placeholder article. I'm still trying to work with the union to have them ratify the collective bargaining agreement. So they are well aware of this timeline, and so I continue to encourage them to, if they think so, to try to move this forward as quickly as possible. If not, we'll just have to delay those benefits until the May annual town meeting, and they're well aware of that.
So Derek, if that wasn't ratified, we would just withdraw the article. Is that your thinking?
Yes, that is correct. Yep.
Okay. Do you think we'll know by well, I guess we'll have to decide by the 20th, one way or the other. It'll either be done or it won't be, and we'll pull it on or we'll leave it or discuss it.
That's right. That's right.
Okay.
If I could just ask one question before you move off of this topic.
Yeah.
Article 1, there were a few pieces of information brought up regarding that parking lot, and prior to if this were to advance to town meeting, there are many folks in this community that have concerns over that parking lot, and so If you think it's relevant, I can start working with a local LSP to look at the soils and the water quality on that property in order to have a report ready for town meeting. The reason why I bring it up tonight is because if we wait until October 20th to make that final decision, I don't know if we would have an environmental report in advance of the the special town meeting on November 10th.
Yeah, I mean, certainly, I mean, we would need that, right? Like, I think that we would be hard pressed. I think we'll be hard pressed from a timing perspective to get that done before the meeting, regardless. But I think that we owe it to the voters to give them that information if there's any possible way we can get it for town meeting. That's my perspective on it. Because that will be one of the biggest questions. I mean, that will be a significant question that comes up, and there'll be a lot of speculation and hand wringing if we don't have the information. So it'll be a lot easier if we can just bring the facts to town meeting and let the voters decide.
Derek, didn't they do some kind of a 21E on it?
So the Thompsons have already completed a phase 1 analysis, and they have installed monitoring wells in 2013, which they had detected, some petroleum products. It's been obviously almost 8 years since they have sampled those monitoring wells, and petroleum products do migrate out the soil, and there's suspicion that many of those products are maybe at low levels at this point. But again, I just remember when we talked about the annual town meeting, it was 6 Main Street, and there were a few folks in town at the town meeting that thought we were referring to one of the Thompson properties, and they stood up and started asking a lot of questions about buried oil tanks and petroleum leaks and hazardous contamination. And so, although we were talking about 6 Main Street, we were able to avoid those questions because that was not the property we were referring to. But I would imagine that especially some of the folks that have been around for generations are going to have those same types of concerns. And so if that is the case, if the board so desires, I would have to start moving on that quickly to get those answers.
Do we have anything in our budget that we could start that process?
So the Board of Selectmen have a line item of $25,000 that is set aside for surveying, engineering work, things of appraisals, things of those needs. So we would use that line item to hire an LSP to conduct this analysis, and then provide a summary report of the current condition of the property and then its potential uses.
Would the board go along with that, Brett?
Well, I mean, I certainly would, right? It's my opinion that we created that fund for exactly these types of things, because we have in the past run into a lot of scenarios where there are questions about appraisal, soil test, sampling, boundaries, et cetera. And this is why we created that fund. So for me, I would support using this money to bring that information to just put any speculation to rest for town meeting. I don't know what you both think.
Could the board go forward with that? Are you in agreement with that, Steve?
Actually, Maureen, my thinking would be we really should have a discussion item on the agenda. When we're talking about spending some dollars, I just don't think that we should shoot from the hip and just kind of attach to no particular discussion, I guess, other than the warrant discussion. Just open up the checkbook and spend that money. I think we really should have a discussion item, earmark it, and discuss it as necessary, and really have a dollar figure that we know what we're spending. I don't really like to just endorse a check and not know where it's going or how we're spending it. So I would not be in favor at this point in endorsing that idea. I hate to be a stickler all the time, but.
No, that's all right. And my guess, Derek, and correct me if I'm wrong, you're essentially looking for directional feedback from us, right, in terms of whether or not this is something we want you to pursue. And then on the 20th, we could we could vote to spend the money or not. Is that fair, or do we have to decide this now? Because certainly we can add it to an agenda. I just know that that's, 15 days or 10 days we won't get back.
Right. I mean, so the concern is certainly time sensitive, and that's why I raised the issue, because as I already pointed out, that in order for these questions to be answered, we are going to need to hire an LSP to do this work. And an LSP for this type of work is going to be anywhere from $9,000 to $10,000 to do this work. But again, the line item which we would be pulling from is the Board of Selectmen line item. And so like we have done in the past when we've hired surveyors and appraisers to do some of this type of work, I've always sought your permission before expending those funds, and that's what I'm doing this evening.
Yeah. So Maureen, what's your take on
Well,
and again, 9 or 10,000?
The next meeting is the 20th. That doesn't give them much time to do it for town meeting.
Right. To me, that's the only reason, right? Because that's 2 weeks out of how many weeks we have before town meeting. So that's my only point. Is it?
I agree, and this kind of comes back to my comments 2 weeks ago. It's like we're creating this pressure and we're creating this giant rush, and I'm not really sure why. If this was a consideration, we should have known this 2-3 months ago. Now here we are, we're using the quotation up against the wall on a timing basis to spend money. We don't have this listed as a discussion item, and we certainly can't make a motion to expend that. I wouldn't think it'd be right I wouldn't feel comfortable making a motion to spend that money without, really, again, having some solid numbers in place and again, having it listed as a discussion item. Again, that's how we've always done it in the past. So, I don't really want to be putting the buggy in front of the horse. Again, and I understand from a timing standpoint, it's a problem, but again, it would have been nice to know this 3 months ago, not 3 weeks ago, or 2 weeks ago, I should say.
We should just remind everybody and ourselves that the only reason this is coming up last minute like this is that the property owner came to the town and said, hey, I've got a credible offer, in hand. I'm going to give you guys one last chance to do this before I accept this offer. So that's the only reason it's come up and why it seems last minute and rushed. Nobody knew this was going to happen 3 months ago or even a month ago, or I'm not even sure exactly when, but it certainly is something that just came up over the past several weeks. Frankly, I think it was the week that the abutters went to the planning board meeting, and my guess is that there was some conversation, total speculation, but regardless, it's just been a couple of weeks that this has come up. So I don't know what your take is, Maureen.
Well, from the beginning with the vision, I thought we had looked at this parcel of land. It's not something new that just came up.
Exactly.
I mean, we were, as the vision had suggested, that was one of the parcels that they were interested in. And I don't think this is anything new. It's just now that we are pressured to do it because he has a potential buyer, and I think that's the town's loss.
Yeah, agreed. So Derek, what do you need from us?
In years past, when we've used this money, I've always asked for a vote so that I can go ahead and move forward and enter into some type of agreement, in this case with an LSP.
And what's the maximum amount that we would expend on this from the line item in our budget?
I would say for environmental purposes, $10,000.
Okay, so Maureen, it's going to be up to you and I if you want to do this. Steve doesn't want the article on the warrant, so I'm sure he's not going to want to spend $10,000 to do an environmental study for a warrant. An article he doesn't support.
No, I know. But I would make a motion.
There is just one other point there. again, not to muddy the water, but yes, we have talked about this parcel, but the town has never had any, well, at least every board that I've sat on, the town has never had any interest in actually purchasing the parcel. We've always had the approach that we wanted to hand the baton and hand that piece of paper to, in fact, the next, the actual end user, the end developer. So again, there's a litany of reasons there why, this just doesn't sit right with me. Again, with no agenda, no discussion item, and just taking a vote on this, I don't like it myself, but I will abstain from the vote, or I will vote nay. So whichever you prefer.
Well, I think I'd like to make a motion to go forward with it. And I think we're pressured now because I think he has somebody else interested in it. And I'd hate to see the town lose that. Because if we can't use it towards the development for the EDC or the vision, then we could use it as municipal parking, or, I mean, that's not much money, and it's less invasive when you go forward with it. And I would make the motion that we allow Derek to go forward with the environmental testing. What's the name of the company? LNS?
No, I would have to hire a licensed site professional. So it's an LSP. There's been no company. Yeah, there's been no company identified, but that's the type of engineering expertise I would have to seek out.
Okay, I would second that.
Maureen Dwinell, aye.
Brett Simus, aye.
Stephen Metellian, nay.
Majority action. Anything else you need on that, Derek? Or are you good?
No, thank you.
Mr. Moderator, do you want to talk about the town meeting warrant at this point, or do you want to wait until we're talking about the quorum?
Is he still there?
Well, you know what's interesting? When I sent you that message, I was concerned at the time that I wanted. Hi, can you guys hear me? Can you hear me?
Yeah, you're breaking up, but we heard you saying
yes or no. I'm here, and I got the audio on, but I don't know if anybody can hear me or see me.
We can hear you.
We cannot see you. We cannot see you, but we can hear you.
My concern at the time was that you guys might vote for the town meeting warrant without the conversation about the 10% quorum. I guess I'm not going to have to worry about you guys voting on the town meeting warrant. Clearly, that's not going to happen tonight. Having said that, I still want to make some comments about going to 10% or not. And can you guys hear me well enough or not?
Okay. Well, we haven't gotten to that.
I don't know whether we should do this on the phone then, because I have a lot to say, even though you have said a lot.
We haven't gotten to that point in the agenda, so let's the board will discuss it, and then we can open it up to you. I don't know if you want to call in or use a different line, but so moving on to item 3.5 to talk about the town meeting quorum. Based on the conversation we've had thus far, I wouldn't support lowering the town meeting quorum. So I don't know where you are, Steve or Maureen, and then obviously Mr. Moderator will want your input as well and your final perspective.
I wouldn't vote to reduce it either.
Yes, I agree with both of you. I would not want to vote to reduce the quorum. I would be in favor of leaving it as it always has been.
Okay. So, Mr. Moderator, do you want to discuss? Do you recommend that we lower the quorum, or are you comfortable leaving it the way it is?
Well, let me say this. Given the articles you have on the warrant, there was no way in the world I would recommend lowering the quorum. Okay. The only article I see there right now, given your discussion, if all you had on there was Article 2B, I'd say, yeah, let's lower the quorum to 10%. but clearly you're going to have a lot more on there than that. And can you hear me or not?
Yep. Yep.
It doesn't sound like you can hear me.
Yeah,
Yes.
we heard you loud and clear,
Yeah,
and
can you hear
we
me?
agree.
Anybody?
Yes.
I'm
Yes.
trying to talk.
Can you see me telling you that we can hear you?
David, we can hear you. You can
But I do
continue.
want to just make a quick comment. Yes, I can see you. Good. Thank you very much. Okay. Good. So I guess what I want to say, first of all, I want to thank the town clerk and the town manager for helping answer a question about any restrictions on articles. Because the state did consider that earlier on, but there are no hard restrictions now. But I think in a way there are some restrictions which you have all just talked about. One of them being if there's a lot of controversy on something, we shouldn't consider it. And also, unless something is time sensitive, we really shouldn't consider lowering the quorum. So in a way, it's good that you're not doing that. Having said that, I am concerned, quite frankly, having a town meeting in the auditorium, given where we are right now still with the COVID situation. So my comment now has got nothing to do with the quorum, but it may have something to do with where we have the meeting, okay? So while I know that it's not an ideal place to have the meeting, you might want to consider having the meeting in the gym. And the reason for that is, in the gymnasium, we can open those two side doors and allow for fresh air to come in, and we can open the back doors to allow air to flow through. Much better than what it would be if we were in the auditorium. Because if we have all of these articles on the warrant, you know a lot of people are going to want to show up. And what concerns me is having a lot of people in the auditorium. Because as much as they've got a system that has the airflow through and so on and so forth, it's not nearly as good as being in, let's say, a room where you have direct outside air coming in and flowing through. So even though the microphone system isn't as good, I really think you've got to consider a different location, because this warrant is going to have a lot of people want to come. And if people are afraid to come because of the COVID situation, then that is also a concern that I have as moderator running the meeting, because then I know we're not really getting what we should have there at the meeting. And we can't simply say to people, well, if you don't like what's going on, come to the meeting. Well, there's a risk at coming to the meeting. And if we have 100 or so people in the auditorium, I'm worried about that. I really am. If we have 100 or so people in the gymnasium, with the doors wide open, I am much less concerned about that. So with the, I really want you to think about that and consider it. But as you say, right now, there's no way we could have this meeting at a 10% quorum. It would be ridiculous, because there's just going to be too much controversy on these articles that are coming up right now. So that's a general statement that I have to say, and I don't know if you guys have any questions for me about that.
The only thing I would offer is I think it's a very valid point. We obviously ran into some controversy in June with the town meeting and doing it indoors. So we certainly have to learn from that experience, and I think at the time we did what the state was recommending and allowed, and I think that there's opportunity to do more than that, right? To make sure that folks are comfortable. So I guess Kelly, Derek, Mr. Moderator, sort of between all of us or all of you, I don't know the best way to assess what the options are or the best alternatives are. I don't know, nobody knows what the weather's going to be, right? But like some towns are renting tents. Is there some way we can do a fully outdoor, town meeting with heaters and an outdoor PA system, socially distanced? So, I really believe that we should look at all those options, because we have the time to do that. So I don't know what other towns know, but again, we don't need to do this now, but let's take this offline as a takeaway to look at those options and try to come up with a good, strong recommendation that everybody's comfortable with. Okay.
Right.
Thank you, Dave. Appreciate it. So moving on to item 3.6, I'll hand this over to you, Derek. On we have some grants to file and accept.
Yeah, so I'll just give you a summary of each one of the grants. The Center for Tech and Civic Life is a $5,000 grant. Kelly, our town clerk, submitted the grant application and was awarded the $5,000. And then she's going to go ahead and acquire voting booths with this money that she's going to use at the presidential election for this year. This will allow, by purchasing additional booths, it allow for further social distancing, which would be challenging right now given the type of booths that we have. The next grant is a Maya Wellness grant. This grant is being orchestrated by Sandy. This is a grant provided by Maya for up to $5,000. We can use this money to establish a healthy workplace, to acquire fitness equipment, bicycle racks that can be placed outside municipal buildings, to offer healthy eating and physical activity trainings. So again, this $5,000 we put towards trying to establish a healthy workforce within our ranks. And the last grant is going to be submitted by Chief Bradley through the Executive Office of Public Safety. This is a body-worn camera program. Chief Bradley is here, so he can certainly answer any detailed questions, but this is a $33,000 grant application to enhance our existing body cam infrastructure. It'll allow us to upgrade the hardware and software and then acquire an additional server, which this is where all the video uploads will be stored. But those are the three. I would ask that you make a motion to file and accept these three grants.
Awesome. Thank you. Any questions or recognition, and we'll take a motion?
I move that we accept the grants for Center for Tech and Civic Life, MIA Wellness, the EOPSS body-worn camera program.
Stephen second the motion, Stephen Mattelli and I.
But Simus, aye. Unanimous action.
If I could just plug in, I did have a quick question, and Maureen, you made the motion before I could ask the question. So a quick question for Chief Bradley. If you could just talk for just a minute about that EOPSS body-worn camera program. Quickly, what does that entail, and what's the dollar value of that grant? I guess I wasn't paying attention. I missed it in the presentation.
Sure, thank you. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, we can.
So recently, the Executive Office of Public Safety came out with a grant solicitation for grant blocks, and they're focused on body-worn camera programs. And this is for to either acquire or to enhance a body-worn camera program. As you know, we do have a program in place which we've used grant funding and earmark funding to get it up and running. I've put in additional application for $33,300 to upgrade our existing cameras, and also including software, and to add an additional server for redundancy and additional storage. So this is a competitive grant, so it depends on what direction they take, whether they want to bring other departments up to speed or they want to allow departments that have programs to enhance their programs. So we'll have to wait and see what direction they go and see if we actually get the grant funding. But it's been applied for. It's $33,300.
Very good. Thank you for the update.
Great. Thank you. We'll move on to item 3.7, reviewing the BOS priority listing. Derek, do you mind walking us through this?
Okay, can you hear me?
Yeah,
so
thanks.
I've listed, this is the most recent update. Again, this was put together by the Board of Selectmen going back to the first week of July. And so as you can recall, you established some initial priorities. Some of these others were set aside until we could try to make some progress on those initial priorities. So starting from the top, the financial reserve policy was voted and approved on July 14th. So that's why that is in green with 100% complete. You can see here these items that are in black. There's been no movement on those as of yet. They haven't been identified as priorities as of this date. Since we have the Grafton Upton Railroad, I just want to let you folks know that although this is not shaded in any specific color, the fire department, code department, and our Department of Public Works is working extremely close with the officials at the railroad. There is current construction that's taking place. There's an expansion of the rail yard and I think 18 additional spurs. That's going to impact our existing sewer easement and sewer that's on that property. It's going to require a demand on our water enterprise system. And so, although again, it's not highlighted in any specific color, we are working very closely with them to ensure that they meet all the local, state, and federal regulations. Moving on forward, so we were set to have this an all boards meeting, which we haven't had as of yet. That's on me to try to organize a meeting with all the partners. We have had many discussions with the Capital Budget Committee on a Saturday 3-hour session to talk about capital improvement planning as a workshop across all of our departments, boards, and committees. That's still in development stages as well. There's no movement on Governor's Landing. As Dennis Westgate has reported in the past, he continues to work with them to determine the best course of action as it relates to water and sewer being brought to that potential development and where is the most appropriate route to take, whether that's on 140 or their initial proposal of going backcountry through the Grove Street development. We've talked a lot about the downtown redevelopment. 6 Main Street, as you all know, is the building's been demolished. Right now it's a vacant parcel of land. It's been landscaped. It's been fenced in to protect against any potential fall injuries. And the future development of that property, I think, falls in the hands of what happens across the street. And to reissue the RFP, again, I think everything that happens at town meeting will set the course for what we decide to do as far as reissuing a potential RFP in the winter. So again, that remains to be seen what happens at the November 10th town meeting. Warren Street redevelopment. So again, working with the DPW, they are in the process of looking at relining the sewer main before we go into any further redevelopment of Warren Street and potential final closure of that road, and also a potential parking lot expansion up to potentially 21 parking spaces over at the Town Hall parking lot. Haven't had any new conversations regarding infrastructure. I will talk a little bit later this evening about the pavement management program and the work that's been completed this paving season. I'll save that for my town manager's update. I think we have completed the RFP committee. I can certainly update that. The RFP committee is no longer in existence, and as of today's votes, we now have an expanded EDC with a new charge. The Racine distribution program, no conversations have taken place on that potential program. Update the master plan, again, that is going to be contingent in large part as to whether or not we're able to hire a town planner. Community center continues to move forward. There was actually a great meeting held today by the building committee over at the VFW parking lot. They mapped out what a potential footprint could be over at that space. So they'll be meeting again next Tuesday as they continue to try to identify the best layout so that they can start to go to schematic design. Preservation of Holy Angels, I think certainly would be contingent upon any further development in the town center. FY22 budget planning, I've had conversations with Dr. Maruchek to date. He has asked for us to hold back a little bit until they can get schools, get the children back into schools. They're now having to move towards a potential hybrid model. So they are very active over there trying to make sure that our children get educated this school season. So outside of that, our finance department has done phenomenal work. I reported at the last meeting some of the work they've done to date. Don't have any new estimates as far as free cash as of yet. We hope that'll be certified by the end of this month. New growth is looking strong this year, much like the previous 2 years. And so we'll build all that for a presentation at some point in the future once we get those final numbers. We held a trash and recycling discussion. Nothing new came out of that discussion with the Board of Health. This again continued to work with a lot of our different departments to ensure that we are being mindful and smart relative to the national conversation about diversity and inclusion. So no real new action has been taken on those fronts, but more or less we are ensuring that we're paying attention to that and maintaining any standards that we think are appropriate. You will hear tonight about the DPW feasibility committee and what they've come up with a potential building. Nothing new on infrastructure upgrades or streets and sidewalks. We've completed the finance department reorg. We are working on the next 48 hours are going to be critical with interviewing 5 candidates for the town planner position. The EDC will be moving forward with any potential new commercial development, given tonight's conversation. Trust fund balances, there was a meeting a couple of weeks ago. As soon as we get those balances, I know that their plan is to try to provide those balances on a quarterly basis. Up until this point, we've only been getting balances on an annual basis. So I know the trust fund committee is working on that as we speak. As far as some succession planning, Sandy is working with all the different departments around forecasting attrition, retirements, potential departures, and what we need to start to plan for over the next 5 years to ensure we have a seamless transition and succession plan for all of our different positions. Capital improvement plan, I just mentioned that. Again, working with Chairman Lazars on developing this 3-hour workshop. And that is pretty much it. No new action on the charter commission, although there's been some discussions about the reorganization with the special legislation that is currently up at the State House with the Board of Assessors position and the Treasurer Collector's position. Outside of that, that's kind of the down and dirty update as far as these items on this list.
Who would put communication with 3 exclamation points at the bottom? That must have been me. So we should talk about that one at some point soon about communicating the warrant to people in town, right? Because that came up last time. I think it's going to come up again, and this comes back to the reason it had 3 exclamation points on it was because I have yet to be at a town meeting where there wasn't some issue or topic where people felt like they were being bamboozled, or that there wasn't transparency, or they didn't know about something, or why didn't they have more information? And so, we all say it. We all say transparency, transparency, transparency. But I don't know. And again, we don't have to talk about it now. But part of it is important that we talk about the warrant and how we might communicate that out to folks. So I just put that out there. Maybe we put that on the agenda for the 20th, Derek.
So communicate the warrant. You want on the next agenda?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, just how we want to get the word out about the meeting. How it's going to be held, where it's going to be held, and what the warrant is.
Gotcha. Okay.
Anything, Steve or Maureen, that you saw in here that hasn't gotten attention that you'd want to say, all right, you know what, let's jump on that now that we've got a few of these other things checked off from a few months ago? Is there anything here that jumps out at you as being an area you'd want to focus over the next couple of months?
I'd like to focus on the FY22 budget process. That would be my, the budget planning.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Do we have the estimated receipts in yet, Derek?
We do not have. I spoke to Kenny 2 days ago, and he's still trying to close out the books. He had stated that his goal is to have them all closed out by the end of this month.
Could we do some plan where we could have a budget planning session sometime after that?
Absolutely. Would we want to do this after town meeting then, I assume, since he's going to close them out at the end of October? We have town meeting November 10th, so maybe we can aim for a budget planning session. I think a good time to do a budget planning session, potentially, again, it's going to be dependent upon what we're hearing from the state as far as state revenues, but maybe we can aim for like a mid-November time period as the departments, boards, and committees start to build their budgets. So typically, I try to have all budget submittals to me by the end of December. So we may want to be in front of that and have this discussion in advance.
Can we get I'm sure they have their budgets pretty much in place the next year without, before we get to what we have for receipts, estimated receipts and revenue for the budgets. Could we do something towards the end of November?
Absolutely. Yeah, we can plan something for November, do a virtual. I have asked Kenny, to do a finance department update to the Board of Selectmen the first week of December. So maybe we could have a special board meeting around the end of November, early December, where he can come in, do a finance department update, and then we can, to your request, move into like a budget planning conversation.
Does that sound good to the rest of the board?
Yes. Yeah, I mean, I was gonna say a couple of points that both of you have made are definitely high up on my radar, so to say, and definitely budget planning is something I would assume that it would need to happen after our town meeting. But yeah, I'd like to take a look at that, and really, I think that as a board we need to set direction. I know that we don't have a lot of variables that are under our control, but we certainly have enough variables that are under our control. So I think we need to, again, make that known ahead of time, so that we don't get a budget that has a lot of wish list things in it, or as it's been used in the past, boutique requests. Not in our budget, but other budgets. But in any event, I think that's something that I definitely would like to put some emphasis on that. And then, as you had mentioned, Brett, certainly with communication, we really need to spend some time and make it very important to make sure we have a safe place, a safe space to hold our town meeting. And it's very tough to predict what kind of a crowd we'll get. It's just under 100 people, I think, at our June meeting, but Mendon had 260 or 280 people. So you don't exactly know what's going to inspire the people to come out. So I think that that's a discussion we really need to have sooner rather than later. And try to get that out and make sure that people feel safe to come out. You know, we want that participation. And the only other thing I would add is under, I think it was under capital planning or not. I think it was infrastructure planning, I think was the one that made me think of it was, Dennis, you had told us that you were going to come forward and meet with us and let us know the results of the tie and bond report. And Derek had mentioned in his report regarding Warren Street and improvements there that may need to be done with the sewer line. So I think that'd be nice to wrap that all up together. So I would say those would be my three that really, you know, take center stage. And then Maureen, while I've got the floor, I guess I'll cut in on your favorite one, town hall use policy. I know you always bring that up, so we should make sure we address that. I know I was faulty in letting that hang around for too long.
Right, just the ambiguities between the language on town hall policy. We could take a look at that. And in December, the department should have their budgets pretty well settled, correct, Derek?
So since I've been here, I've tried to, my goal is to always have, so after town meeting, I issue a budget memo providing an outline of and a framework of what I expect for departments to do as far as submitting their budgets. And a lot of it talks about COLA and you know, no new incentives unless it's an absolute emergent need, you know, to Selectman Matalian's point, you know, no boutique requests. And so I usually issue that right after town meeting, and I give them till right around the Christmas time period to submit their budgets. A lot of these budgets are, you know, it's a lot, and there's not a lot of guessing in them because you're basically taking last year's budget and making a few minor modifications and then submitting them. And now that we use the budgeting software program, it has really streamlined and has made it so much more efficient. So you know, we don't need a lot of time to construct our budgets. So they will normally submit them towards the Christmas time period, and then I try to turn those budget submittals into a report to be submitted to the Finance Committee and the Board of Selectmen, usually by mid-January. So that usually takes me a couple of weeks to build that report with Kenny, go through the numbers, make sure they're accurate, and then turn that over for public consumption.
Do you give them the information on what's available?
Available in which sense?
Available funds for budgets? So that they're aware of how tight everything is?
We have that discussion. So, and we've already had that discussion this year. You know, we never give them the total amount that can be spent, right? So, you know, it's like when you work with a vendor, the first question they ask you is how much money do you have to spend, right? So usually my budget framework outlines what they can build in their budget for COLA, so cost of living increases, what they need for their ordinary maintenance, so for utility costs and their fuels and their trainings. And then I have, since I've been here, have tried to really limit the new initiatives, unless it's of paramount importance. Then I would then consider it, and then would potentially include that in my budget presentation.
Okay.
Thank you.
Other things you'd want to prioritize, or is that good for now? We can you know, revisit this or touch base with Derek too offline and make sure there's nothing missing or that we want to prioritize. We can do that as well. So, with that, DPW feasibility committee presentation. I will hand it over to who's taking this, Derek?
I'm taking it. Brett,
Awesome.
This is Rick McGuire. I will kick it off. And we also have Jeff Alberti here, he's just come online. And he had previous commitments, so we were hoping that he'd get here in time, but he had plenty of time. What I want to do is just come in and then give you a status update, but it's ultimately more than a status update because it's really what we've done to end up where we are. Okay. And I am in the process of going to activate this thing, and I've got your GoToMeeting in the way, and I got to move it. So let me do that. Okay. Hopefully you can see this on the screen.
Yeah, sure.
So okay, good. So I'm coming here to talk about the DPW feasibility committee, Brett and team. And what we want to talk about is not only a status update. We want to show you the journey that we have been on to get where we are. And it's been a long journey, but I think you'll be pleased with what you see. And Jeff will come in and he's going to show you some of the graphics as to what we ended up with and some of the financial costs. So the next slide, contents, I want to look at the timeline. And since we're short on time, I know it's late. I'm going to highlight the slides. I'm going to make the slides available for the committee and we can post them. So talking about the timeline, the committee background, the approach and methodology, what our priority goals are and outcomes and next steps. When we take a look at this project, believe it or not, started in 2013. The town authorized $25,000 to do the DPW feasibility study, and at that point in time, there was a different DPW director. I believe it was Vinny, and Kelly can correct me if there was one prior, but that's what happened then. So in 2017, Weston and Sampson, and I believe it was Jeff, came forward. He put together a study, interviewed a number of the folks here, came through with the study, and it was completed on September 20th of 2017. He was asked to come back in August of 28, and I think, Brett, maybe that's a presentation you may have seen. When we look at where we were in the DPW, there were numerous deficiencies identified in 4 major categories. Jeff will get into some of that. Employee safety was the #1 thing that we concerned as a deficiency. Environmental and regulatory agency non-compliance was another big issue. We had operational inefficiencies. For instance, Dennis has to move 2 or 3 vehicles to get an important vehicle out in a snowstorm. We had code and ADA non-compliance. The preferred concept at that point was $11.8 million. That was in 2017 dollars with an escalation in there for 2018 and 19. So in 2019, town meeting in January of 2019 allocated $12,500 to continue the planning process, and this committee was created. That was in January 2019. The last meeting we had was in February 18, 2020. Due to the COVID and planning issues, we reconvened in August. I personally was very honored to work with this team. It's a very high performance team. Some really distinguished individuals. For instance, Andy Leonard is on the team. He's site design preparation and does the contracting on site design. Dave O'Brien, application engineer, involved in material movement, specs out hoist, cranes, stuff we will need in this DPW building. Dan, architectural design engineer. We appointed just recently Jonathan. He's an electrical and mechanical contract engineer for a large contractor in Boston. Peter, DPW director in Arlington. Bill Montenegro, civil engineer. Both Peter and Bill, due to health reasons and work constraints, had to leave the team in, I believe it was March. I'm not going to go through the whole thing, but as you would guess for our approach and methodology, we interviewed Jeff, went through the presentations, went through his documents. We toured the existing facilities to evaluate needs and critical components. We interviewed key officials, Dennis, Kelly, and Johnny Johnson. And this was more than just an interview. Dennis and Kelly participated in all of our meetings. So every time we had a committee meeting, which really ran about every month, they were present and participating. We also brought in Mike Marchand. He worked on the first proposal design for the first building in 1996, 97, and he brought forward the institutional knowledge and experience of what they had done, trade-offs, and what future plans were, which really helped us. Lastly, I think it was in June, we had an off-site workshop. Dennis participated with the team. We looked at the initial concept, we reviewed the buildings, went in and did a value engineering study. And in the value engineering study, what you do is you seek to determine what the priorities are and your top level requirements. And then we went to Jeff and said, you know, here's what requirements are, top levels, and let's move forward. This is just a quick list. Number one priority for us was employee health and safety, plus any citizen who may come onto the site. Second highest priority was meet current building codes and environmental regulations, OSHA, EPA. The next three really have to do with the effectiveness of the DPW for emergency response and their effectiveness both today and for the future. We looked at a 10% growth factor, but when you see what was done, I believe you're going to see it's somewhat larger than that. Another goal was to incorporate the administrative office staff in the same building or set of buildings and provide the latest in technology and networking and wireless. And then as you see, another thing that the DPW does that they really don't get recognized for, support for other departments. They're working with the police. I've been over there in a snowstorm and the mechanic is out in the snow fixing the police car, put the hood up, he's not in the building. So they do a lot of work they don't get credit for. The last item is really the overarching goal for the whole thing. It was an opportunity for us to phase the project and balance the DPW's needs, requirement versus what the town could afford. So really where we were, we actually went through 3 different architectural building and site layouts. So we've been through this journey, if you will. And what we settled upon was a new building layout with a linear structure with expansion capability. The central fueling project, we're looking at that as a separate project and a project that would be involving potentially the fire department and the DPW. When the committee looked at this, part of one of the approaches we were given is look at a 3-phased approach. When we looked at the numbers and what was delivered versus our top priority goals and requirements, we didn't meet them. So what happened in phase 1, we weren't able to address the top priority goals in employee safety or regulatory compliance. The other thing we found out as we looked at projects and looked at the costs when we split them from one big project to 3 to 2, there was anywhere from $600,000 to $1 million in overall cost that could be avoided if you went from a 3-phase project down to 2. So let me just, this is the journey. I'm not going to dwell on it. This is the existing site, and this is the existing site here, if you can see it. This space here was all space that was dedicated to the DPW facility. And in the green space here, we have as much area and space as we did in the original footprint. So there's plenty of room for expansion if we need it for future needs. So space is there. Trailers over here. And what we want to do is bring all of these blocks, if you will, ultimately into one building for administrative efficiency. The other thing that came out of discussions with the former team, they had put in a hookup so that we can take wastewater that's coming off of this site. There's a tap in there for the wastewater and the sewer system, so we can tap into it and connect directly to the sewer system. The other thing was there was space in the original design back in this section where they had set aside that space for a transfer station, which might be an answer to some of the waste discussions that we've had. This was the original concept, that we were going to have sort of an L-shaped building. And as you can see right here, you have a wash site, a maintenance site, the doors where trucks are coming in and out are right here. Parking for citizens and employees is right here in front. You've got more heavy equipment and front end loaders coming through here. So that was a potential safety hazard. The other thing is, sorry, we had the salt sheds here. So what we did Yeah, I gotta. So originally in 2017, we had a cost 11.84 million for that proposal that came forward in 2017 and 18. The cost was in 2017 dollars. We had an escalation of about 4% in 18 and 19 to finish the building over a 3-year period. We're going to renovate existing building, construct a new building. And the committee estimated that plan entailed spending about 1.5 million for site work and retaining walls. And I'll show you that. Because the site, if you look at this yellow building that was here, underneath it, in this spot right here, is the existing trailer. So they were going to have to dig into a hill here, about 30 feet tall, remove all that earth, put in retaining walls. The earth on this side where this proposed canopy was about 40 feet. And then it would have to build a wall down through here. So it was a lot of site work that was truly unnecessary. The second target we had, and this is sort of the second architecture. I think it was in October, Mr. Flaherty and Derek came to us and said, folks, we got roughly $3.2 million to spend, see what you can come up with. So we modified the building, and where we had an L shape before, we went more towards a linear building. It had a cap. This cap was administrative area. And what it ultimately was about a 4,500 square foot building. But to do it and expand this way, we had to move the salt shed. And one of the requirements that came out of the discussions was salt shed today is old, maybe has a couple years useful life, but it's under capacity. It doesn't get us through a 2 or 3 day storm well. And if it does get us through 1 or 2 days, even though you have a PO, your delivery truck might not come in for 2 or 3 days later. The canopy was here. So we look at that, well, where are we? The estimated cost for that was $3.7 million, or roughly $515 a square foot, which is really even more than we were looking at for the proposal that came forward in 2018. So that involved select site development for sewer hookup and canopy relocation. We had to move the salt shed. We had to put in ventilation system because the diesel particulates in that building, and anytime you have a snowstorm, is just awful. Committee determined that site work for the canopy, relocation, and the wall was unnecessary expense, so we started looking at other alternatives. We also looked at the building, and if you notice, turns out this is the existing building here. This building ended up being very close to the road. The road is really right down through here. And we were in a situation where if the semis and 18-wheelers came in here, we were very concerned about them possibly hitting the buildings because it was that tight. So we said that was a negative. The other thing was the committee discovered that the proposed site for this building was sitting on today's septic system. Now, we want to go to the hook up to the existing sewer connection, but putting the building here creates a risk in the sense that if there is any issue when we do the engineering studies on that sewer hookup, our fallback position or contingency would in fact be that septic system. So basically we ruled this site out. You see that. I'll just show you this next site. It's too much of an eye test, but really it ended up being about 2.3 million for that building, to build that building, move a salt shed, do some miscellaneous slight development site work, $515 per square foot. And the reason for that is you had to do all this infrastructure work, moving stuff that added cost, but it didn't come forward to value to either Dennis or value that we could present to the citizens and say, hey, we've really done something to help out. Lastly, when you take a look at what we eventually looked at, we came down to a linear structure. And this structure then would allow us to expand if for any reason we grew dramatically, we maybe took on some DPW work for another town and you needed more space, you could grow this way and add it to that building. So we've set it up so that you can build here. And really the next site looks something like that. I'm going to hit you just with the recommendations. Just keep this in mind. Then Jeff is going to go through the presentation. He has just high level talking about requirements that he has and really what we've ended up with. What we're talking about is a two-phased approach is what the committee's recommending. We're saying two-phase because you can eliminate the $600 to $1,000 million in cost by going from three phases to two. We also said a phase one should address top priority goals, which is employee safety, citizen safety, and regulatory compliance. And the approach that Dennis likes, and Jeff is going to show you, we're able to accomplish that goal. When we look at the total building for vehicle and equipment storage, we end up with an area of 15,800 square feet, which is roughly about 98% more vehicle space than what we had in the current building. We have currently about 8,000 square feet. So we want to reuse the existing building of 9,000 square feet and have 19,700 square feet of new construction for a total of 28,700. When we met on last Wednesday, September 30th, and we were working with numbers of 33,900 square feet for a building. We had almost a 3-hour meeting on that Wednesday night, look at reducing costs, but meeting the requirements and this sort of thing. And what that came out, we had some additional meetings on Friday with Dennis and Jeff, and we really found that we had a workshop in there that was 2,500 square feet. We could reduce it to 1,500, reduce the width of the building. We have this building down to 28,700 square feet. And we have the equipment list, we have the employee list, and this will cover all of the needs for the next 10 to 20 years as presented. We have a central fueling project, and we're looking at that, as I mentioned, at a later date. Now, this has been through 2 DPW directors. So the former director, Vinny, wanted to keep the water and wastewater separate. This plan includes bringing the water and wastewater personnel to house their equipment here and also to have administrative space and meeting space here in this building that we've laid out. So with that, I will turn it over to Jeff. Jeff is going to go through the details and show you the buildings and the plan. Remember, it's a 2-phase plan, and I think you'll like what you see. And Jeff and Dennis said he is really pleased with the direction that this has turned out and is going in. I will turn it over.
Okay, thank you very much. Can you see my screen?
We do.
Thank you.
All right, thanks. So I'm going to walk you through a presentation. It'll cover some of the same topics. I'll try not to be too repetitive, but certainly if you have questions along the way, feel free to ask me, and I'll try to get through this in a quick manner. Really what I wanted to talk about today is starting with just a very quick summary of the public works responsibilities. I know you probably know that. For anyone that's watching, I just want to make sure everyone understands what DPW does for the community, because that's really what drives this facility. Talk briefly about why you need a new facility, show you some photos. We'll move through what is proposed, what are the benefits, and then to some questions and comments. So as part of public works responsibilities, really it's easy to sum it up with the upper statement. The DPW touches the lives of the residents every day by maintaining the infrastructure that the community relies on. As you look down a list of what DPW does, from maintaining 80 miles of road to dealing with flood prevention, roadside brush, maintaining park, cemetery, and forestry, water, wastewater systems, think about what we all use on a regular basis, and that statement really holds true, that they are maintaining that infrastructure out of sight, not of mind for much of the time, but that what we all rely on. And the facility and the operations need to be supported properly. They're also on call 24 hours a day. They're a single shift operation, but during an emergency, they're there for 24, 48 hours. The obvious snow and ice storms, hurricane, windstorm cleanup is becoming more and more of an issue these days, to dealing with the flooding, water main breaks, sewer breaks, And as was mentioned earlier, as Rick mentioned, supporting other emergency departments. I think APWA, American Public Works Association, has done a really good job of getting that message out, where one of their headline articles says that the public works are the first responders who are there until the emergency is over. And since 2009, the Department of Homeland Security has classified public works as a first responder. So why does the town need a new facility? If you've had an opportunity to go out to the site, it's quite apparent. The existing main facility is undersized. It does not adequately support current operations. As a result, as you can see in the bottom right, you have administrative offices and a temporary trailer. And on the left, you have some very limited covered storage with a fabric structure. You have a very valuable fleet. You have a multi-million-dollar fleet, and the DPW tries to do their best to protect that investment that you've all made in that fleet by keeping it undercover so it lasts longer, less maintenance. And over the years, the DPW operations have grown significantly, but the building just hasn't kept pace. As you move inside, you begin to see some of this larger equipment, this expensive multi-use equipment stored inside. And as you look around, you can see there's materials everywhere. They really pack it in like sardines to really protect that equipment. Here's another view looking at some of the clearances in the upper right. You can see there's just inches between plows in the back of trucks, so they try to get as much undercover as they can. But even by doing that, a large portion of the fleet is stored outdoors or under this makeshift fabric structure to try to protect it to extend its useful life. As you move inside, the employee support spaces, they're just non-existent really. This is a view of the locker area that's actually out in a vehicle storage garage. As you move into some of the employee support spaces, such as the lunch and break room, it also functions as a meeting room and a training room and a storm event room. And you can see that it doesn't fit that many staff, but what it really needs to do is support up to 12 staff in the summer months, up to 30 staff during the winter storm events. And in some cases, when they're there for 24 or 48 hours, you don't want to lose staff to go home because you need them for that storm event. They have no place to rest. Essentially, you find people resting in their vehicles. As you move into the maintenance area, which is a critical function to maintain the equipment so that it's actually out on the road providing the service to the community, we found that space does not meet safety standards. It's poorly ventilated. It has poor lighting, non-shop code compliant clearances. Clearly, they do the best that they can by using the space as efficiently as possible, but it's really a double-use space. They use it for parking part of the time and maintenance the other, so you find there's a lot of jockey around of equipment. I did try to get a picture of your vehicle wash area and your indoor vehicle wash area, and this is not a mistake. There actually isn't one. The facility cannot support proper washing of this equipment, so what you find is the equipment has to be washed outdoors. And it's really important, especially with the nature of the chemicals and materials that are used by this equipment, to properly wash those vehicles. So that'll extend its life. It removes that highly corrosive material from the vehicles. It reduces maintenance costs. So there's so many benefits, but you just don't have the facilities to allow staff to do it, especially during the cold winter months when you really need it. So moving on to what is proposed, it was a very good process that we followed when we began this. We did a lot of meetings with the staff. As an organization, our company has been involved in more than 120 public works facilities, but what we find is that every community does it differently. So we really wanted to spend time with your staff to understand your operations and help guide that process. So through that process, we started by preparing programming sketches. We sketched up every space from offices to locker rooms to the vehicle maintenance area to the vehicle and equipment storage areas. We use that as a guide to start with our initial programming assessment. And then we met with the committee, as was mentioned by Rick, to really fine-tune that program. And the history of the programming really goes like this. If you look at the subtotal at the bottom, you see that the original facility program back in 2017 started off at about 26,800 square feet. We did an initial revision, brought it down to about 25.8. As we got more involved with Dennis and we looked at bringing the water and sewer back in, we had a jump back up to 31,950. And then in this and that was actually presented to the board back in August 2018. And then in this most recent iteration that we worked with the committee in September and earlier this month, we came up with a Rev 3 that brought us down to the 28.7. So you can see there's a bit of a little roller coaster ride here, but I'm pleased to say that the reduction from 31,950 to 28,700 was done in a way to come up with a 10% reduction in what I think has no impact to the operations, meaning really good suggestions by Dennis and the committee to fine tune and change the orientation on site so we could actually reduce the program but not impact the operations. So I think it was a great effort by everyone. So as we moved into developing this two-phased approach, this is the existing conditions plan. The blue buildings that are shown here represent existing buildings. You can see Pleasant Street is to the left of your screen. And the first step, the phase one, and we call it a phase 1A and 1B because there's going to be a little bit of shifting of operations. That's probably the biggest challenge when you're working on an existing site. You have to make sure that the operations can continue throughout construction. So what we're proposing is to start with the construction of a building addition, shown in red, as well as a new salt shed and relocating that fabric structure that exists. We figure why not reuse it? It does provide some coverage, and relocating the diesel fuel system that exists on site. What that would look like when it's done, shown here with the yellow outline or yellow shading of the new structures. You can see that in the center of your screen, this represents basically addition to the existing building. And you can see the program in the right side of your screen. What would be accommodated from this program, the 28,700, would be a partial construction of the vehicle and equipment storage area. It would be the full wash bay, as well as a partial construction of the vehicle maintenance area, essentially the first two maintenance bays that are needed. What we would do at that point is take the operations that are in the existing building, move them into the new addition. That would allow us to renovate that existing building, making best use of that building. And within that existing building, we would renovate it to accommodate, shown by the red arrows, the administration and office support. We would support the employee facilities, locker, shower, toilets, as well as the workshop. That would also give the town the opportunity to move out of that temporary trailer and move back into a newly renovated structure. So that would wrap up the phase one of construction. And as we are currently pricing out, we're looking 3 years out from that phase one to do phase two, which is a bit smaller. And essentially that would include the third maintenance bay and the vehicle storage area, the remainder of the vehicle storage. So if you're looking at those red arrows, you can see that now the partial goes away on the vehicle maintenance. We have our full vehicle maintenance bay and space included, as well as we move the partial on the vehicle and equipment storage. Now we have the full program, which would essentially look like this at 28,700 square feet. So it's a really nice linear layout across the site. It really works well from circulation, and it really allows for good or efficient construction on site so they can maintain their operations. So really getting to the cost to try to show you from a high level, as was mentioned back when this was presented to the board in 2018, the total project cost was $11.8 million. And you can see in the center of these costs is your construction costs. And you'll see this number in a moment, the $297 a square foot was the cost per square foot that we had developed for just construction. So under this proposed development, phase one, we have our 2021 pricing, total construction cost, $9.7 million, and that's shown in the image on your right. Phase two, going out 3 years from there, is another $4.15 million. Total project cost would be $13.85 million. Within that, you'd have approximately $300,000 in escalation for phase two. If you were to combine this for comparison purposes and look at the average cost per square foot for construction, it's about $392 a square foot. So just to give you some perspective, as I mentioned, we've been doing public works facilities for 20 years, so we have some really good data. So when we compare, we're not using averages for police stations and fire stations and town halls. These are just DPW costs, and these are just construction costs, and this is the cost per square foot graph by year. And if you look at when you started this project, and this just shows you that the longer you wait, the more money it's going to cost. We kind of all know that, but this is a good graph to illustrate that. Back in 2013, when you started this process, if you were to build 28,700 square feet, all brand new, it would be about $7.8 million. in construction costs, not including soft costs. Shoot ahead to 2021 at $450 a square foot, 12.9 million, again, just for construction. So where does your project fall on this graph? Here you can see the 2018 cost at $297 that I mentioned earlier, and the 2021 cost at $392. So the first comment or reaction I would expect is, why are you so much lower? And I think that goes to what's being proposed by the committee, and that is the reuse of the existing structure. So the reuse of the assets that you have on site really helps to tremendously lower the cost compared to what other communities are doing, which is represented by that blue line. But since 2018, we have seen the escalation, and if you take that escalation line and just simply shift it down to match our two numbers, and this was not by any means fabricated, it just really does reflect the fact that we are tracking the escalation really well. You can see that there has been significant escalation over the last 2 years, just from the fact that you haven't been able to move forward with the project. The one thing that we are currently thinking about and looking at is, what does this recession, we've all heard that we're in a pandemic-driven recession. What does that mean for costs? So this maroon arrow represents what we're seeing right now. It's very new to us all. We don't really know if it's going to be a very quick impact and it's going to rebound, but we just opened up bid prices. We're expecting them to be in the $430 square foot range. They came in at $375 for a public works facility. So now is a great time to really think about moving a project forward. I know most people don't, when they hear that and they think we're in a recession, they say, how could you think about moving this project forward? It's never going to cost any less. You're going to have very competitive prices, which will yield lower costs. And then just the cost of money is so cheap right now. So over a long-term borrowing, it really pays dividends to invest and move these projects forward, because at some point it's going to rebound and come back up to what historically we see for these prices. In closing, there's quite a bit of benefits. I could probably spend a whole evening talking about the benefits of a new facility, but I just wanted to touch on some that we know of just from our experience. And first and foremost, it provides you with a code compliant and safe work environment for your staff. You really just don't have that because that facility is undersized. It protects, as I mentioned earlier, a multi-million-dollar investment that you've made in these vehicles and in equipment. It'll extend the life of that equipment. It will reduce maintenance costs, allow you to get much more out of it. It provides much more efficient workspace and response times. The staff will be able to get more done because they're not on-site jockeying around vehicles all day long to try to get to the piece of equipment that they need. And it eliminates the need to invest in Band-Aids in substandard facilities. So upgrade them now versus replacing things that are eventually going to have to get replaced a few years later. So with that, I'll turn it back over to any questions.
This is great, Rick. Thank you. Jeff, thank you very much. This is, obviously reflects an incredible amount of work over the past year plus that this committee's been in place. Part of what we asked for when we saw the first presentation was to have a phased breakout. So it's nice to see that. It seems to me that the design looks a lot cleaner, and reusing existing infrastructure is critical. So it's nice to see all those things have been incorporated. Obviously, this is a tremendous investment that the town will need to figure out where in our set of strategic priorities it fits over the next 5+ years. Obviously it's not, at least from my perspective, anything that's going to happen certainly in the near term, the next year or so, given some of the other priorities that we have in town. But this analysis and the work, I think, is, in some ways it's timeless, right? Because unless the town's not going to change, so even if we, don't look at this for a year, when we come back to it, it still is a very, very valuable exercise to have gone through. So, just thank you and congratulations. It's a great outcome. So, Steve, Maureen, do you have questions now or anything you'd like to share?
I have no questions, but great job done. It's a very nice looking facility, and I think it would work for the employees. I'd like to see it go forward, but I don't know if the town can afford it right now.
Yeah, definitely excellent work up to this point in time. There's an awful lot to absorb here. I mean, I'd like to kind of get a hard copy of this so I could read it over. The first thing that jumps out to me is the size of it from a square footage percentage, or from that position of square footage, 28,700 seems awful big for what we have here in Upton. But again, I'd like to really read it cover to cover before I, come forward with any other questions at this point. But very well done, gentlemen. Thank you.
We'll be happy to make the two presentations available for you. If you look at today's current building, the inside is around roughly 9,000 square feet. And we didn't say it just because of time constraints, but if you looked at what we had for the phase one, I think the total building size was phase one, 20,000 square feet. And of that gave Dennis 8,500 square feet for vehicle and equipment storage, which was an increase for him of 6%. But more importantly, it gave him wash bays, and it gave him an area for the mechanic to work that was that particular person's space without, you saw the pictures. I mean, they were sitting on top of one another. But it then begins to help Dennis become more efficient in the longer term. I mean, I've watched them. They move 3 or 4 trucks to get the one piece out they need. And that's just not the way to start the day when you have a blizzard coming or whatever. But again, it was 20,000 square feet is what we recommended. And when in the phase one, and at 20,000 square feet, to put it in perspective, that would roughly double the size of the existing, it's a little bit more than double the size of the existing building. I think if you look at the outside of the building, it might have been around 9,500 square feet. Inside, it's 9,000. So,
Oh, that's
Dennis,
great.
you've been along for the voyage and the journey. Any comments?
Through the chair, if I may.
Please.
So first and foremost, I want to thank the committee as well. I couldn't have asked for a better committee to really take charge of trying to solve a long-standing problem in this town of deciphering what the community really needs for a public works building, and doing their very best to keep costs down in that bay. And they worked incredibly hard and gave up an awful lot of their own personal time to see this through. And I can't thank them enough. The size of the building, too, another consideration, Steve, I want you to keep in mind is you're also moving administration in there that's currently in a trailer. We're also moving the water and wastewater vehicles over there, and there's a plan right now in part of the development of the capital improvement for water and wastewater to augment the garage over at the treatment plant that I would propose that we don't do. And we invest those funds into this building to bring everybody under one central roof. And then you have the wash bays. So you look at the size of the building, and I agree with you. The first thing you think of is, do we really have that much equipment? But when you consider all the components and facets of public works that's going under that roof, it takes up all of that roof. And other than that, I realize that is a really big decision for the town. And I realize all the other things that are going on right now in Upton. I'm just pleased that we actually have something that I think is in the best interest of the community and allows the Public Works Department to do what they need to do safely and can be considered in the future.
Yeah.
Dennis, as far as water and wastewater now, is there garage space inside? And if there is, how much is there right now? Room for approximately how many vehicles inside right now at water and wastewater?
No, there's none. They have small garage space over there that they keep some lawnmowers in and whatnot, and tools. I think you could probably stick one vehicle in the one next to the lab, but they don't really. My predecessor had originally thought of putting a building over there, but my philosophy is public works is public works. So we're designed to utilize resources, that's equipment and personnel interchangeably to the greatest extent possible. And there's no better way to do that than to put everybody under one roof. I'm not looking to duplicate efforts. I'm not looking to bring all of the technology for the wastewater treatment plant and put it in this plant. I'm looking to store their equipment, to give the employees a place to have a meeting room, a lunch room, a place to take a shower and sleep during snowstorms, things that they don't have currently.
No, it's great. Very, very good stuff. Anything else on this before we move on to recognition?
I just want to thank the team for their efforts. There's many Saturdays in there, many long hours, and thank you all for going the distance. It wasn't easy.
I would imagine this stuff is, the good news is we had a really good committee with a lot of differing opinions, which, can be difficult, but also helps get to the best outcome. And it seems to me that you guys got to a really, really good outcome. So it was worth all of that wrangling to get to such a great place. And that's why we, do it the way we do it. So really, really nice work. The next agenda item is recognition. And before I open it up, I would just like to share some of my own recognition. As many of you know, I'm guessing maybe all of you know, there was a terrible car accident involving 5 teenagers over on Hartford Ave South a week or so ago. And I just wanted to commend the EMTs, the paramedics, the fire department, the police department, and the DPW, and all the folks that were part of that exercise. It's got to be, obviously it was an incredibly long night, an incredibly long couple of days, and just heart-wrenching, right? Like I know the people that do that work, and I know that it's, comes with the territory, and they don't always see it, but we see it and recognize it for what it is, which is a tremendous sacrifice, a personal sacrifice, and having to live through and go through those kinds of events is just really, really tough. And everybody in town was thinking of not only the teenagers, but all of the first responders that were involved in showing up on that scene and dealing with it. That's a lot to manage and carry. So just thank you to everyone involved. Just great work. Steve, Maureen, recognition from your side?
Just like to support everything that you've said, and kudos to all of those that were involved in this terrible, terrible situation.
Yes, I would agree with that. And really speaks to the safety of today's vehicles. We are privy to some knowledge about the speed that was involved in that wreck, and it's really amazing that all of the passengers in that vehicle are still alive with us today. So,
yeah, amazing. Thank you. Derek, town manager report.
Sure. I know it's late, so I'll keep my comments short. But I want to start with personnel. So in the next couple of weeks, we are planning a pinning ceremony for the many police officers that have been appointed over the last 6 months, and 2 of them have been promoted to sergeant. But most recently, I want to announce that Mr. Mason Brown and Mr. Javier Valdesario have both been appointed as new police officers to the Upton Police Department. In addition to that, unfortunately, I have to share with you that our social services coordinator, Jessica Morrow, has tendered her resignation and will be leaving us on October 19th. So Jessica's worked for the town for over 5 years now, and she's really done a great job supporting the COA and the work of the senior center. So we're gonna miss her, but we truly understand, why she has to make this tough decision. So hopefully we can celebrate her departure with her, and bid her farewell prior to her departure. So moving on to some operational facts, I had mentioned in the past that the code department was moving forward with a program called Permit Pro. It's our online permitting software program. That was launched on October 1st internally. So we're working out any kinks. We expect to launch this publicly to our contractors on October 13th. But right now, the early feedback is that this is saving our staff over 66% of their time just in entering permits. So it's reduced the permit processing time to just 30% of what they normally would have been doing. So it's already bearing some fruit. So we're going to continue to roll that out into the Board of Health Office and the Fire Department as soon as the Code Department is speed. Speaking of the Code Department, who would have thought, again, given this pandemic, that we are actually this time compared to last time are up 13% in building permits. So last year at this time we had 272 permits pulled, and now we have 308, and we received another dozen or so over the last couple of days. So there's a lot of activity in the community as it relates to new construction and renovations. As you could predict, the town clerk's office is extremely busy. Early voting will begin on October 17th and go to October 30th. The early voting will be just like we did for the primaries. That voting time period will be during our normal business hours, Monday through Friday, and then on weekends from 9 to 1. And it'll only be at the town hall. In addition to that, as you can imagine, given the pandemic, we've received a lot of requests for mail-in voting. So 4 years ago, during the presidential race, we had approximately 400 requests for mail-in votes. This year alone, we've already received over 2,500 requests for ballots to be mailed back to our voters. So Kelly and her team are extremely busy, and we stop down at town hall. You'll see a whole team of volunteers in the meeting room helping to distribute those ballots. So it's a very busy time of year for the town clerk's office. Tomorrow, both Kenny Costa, myself, and Deb Tater, our treasurer collector, we are holding a conference call with one of the rating agencies. As you know, we have a AA+ rating. Our intention is to try to continue to maintain that AA+ rating as we seek to refinance the town hall debt at the end of this month. In addition to that, if we get favorable rates, we're also discussing a potential refinancing of the fire truck, the water main over on Alfred North, and then the Fowler Street Bridge. If successful, we're projecting to save over the next 10 years about $500,000 between CPC, the general fund, and enterprise accounts by this refinancing. So again, strong work by our finance team to pull this all together. As far as public works goes, as you can imagine, we're heading towards the end of our pavement management season. This past year, there was an aggressive pavement management program. Now that we're completing it, we paved approximately 5.6 miles of roadway. We have 70 miles of roadway, so this year's paving program represents about 8% of all of our town accepted roads. The roads that have been completed this year, and there'll be some final paving this week to end this season, is Bradish Farm Road, Old Grafton Road, William Street, Alfred Ave South, Walnut Street, Briarwood Lane, Pearl Street, and Prospect Street. In addition to just this new asphalt that's been laid, we've continued our crack sealing program to address many of the streets throughout the town. Catch basin repairs and outfall maintenance was completed, including much needed maintenance to several detention basins. And then all of our 858 catch basins received cleaning, and every road in the town was also swept in accordance with our MS4 program. So again, I wanted to highlight a lot of the great work that's taken place over the last couple of months by various departments that I've mentioned this evening. So as we head towards the winter months, the DPW is starting to prepare for their trucks and equipment for snow and salt operations. And then, as you know, the presidential election is slated for November 2nd, right, Kelly? Is it November 2nd? November 3rd. November 3rd is the presidential election. So pending any questions, I'll turn this back to the chairman.
Great. Thank you. Any questions, Maureen or Steve?
No, I have none at this time.
Great work on all counts, Derek. Thanks for the update. There's, so many great things going on in town. So thank you for your leadership and work. And I know that reflects a lot of people on the team that are doing work as well. So thanks to you and everyone else. We will pass over upcoming meeting agenda items. We talked a bit about that with priorities. Any new business? I would think we've talked about that as well, but I'll ask you both. No. And then any public comment? With that, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
I'll move that we adjourn the meeting.
Second the motion.
Maureen Dwinell, aye.
Second the motion, Stephen Mattelli and I.
Brett Simons, aye. Meeting adjourned at 9:52. Thanks, everyone.